Well, good morning. Welcome to Michigan Virtual's webinar on Equity of College Access, a Vision of Dual Enrollment for All. I am Kristen Flynn, Executive Director of Student Learning Services, and I want to welcome you here to a really exciting morning with some amazing guests talking about this topic. My background involves 22 years serving in public education as a high school teacher and administrator prior to joining Michigan Virtual 5 years ago. Just a little focus on Michigan Virtual. We are in our 21st year and we have had over 300,000 enrollments. As a nonprofit organization, we believe in advancing K-12 digital learning and teaching through research, practice, and partnerships, but also know that every person can use digital learning to reach his or her full potential. Michigan Virtual offers over 250 middle and high school courses online. And as I mentioned, we have 300,000 since we started, but 30,000 annually enrollments on the student side. And we also offer professional learning for educators. This last year, we had over 70,000 enrollments with educators earning sketches and accessing content and information online. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. By default, your microphones are all going to be on mute. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, please type them into the chat box and we'll address those questions. We also, at the end during Q&A, if you have a question that you would like to verbally ask, just raise your hand with the raise hand feature and we will unmute your mic and let you ask your question and have the panelists best answer that. This meeting is being recorded, so if you would like to rewatch it or send it on to a colleague, we will make sure that anyone that's been registered for that gets the meeting recording following this. The purpose today, as we talked about earlier, is really just to understand more of the inequity of college access in Michigan and to try to address those efforts with the work that's happening with MCAN, Michigan Virtual, and St. Clair County Community College. We will learn more about MCAN and their mission to increase college readiness and hear a little bit more about the partnership between Michigan Virtual and St. Clair County Community College to offer dual enrollment courses to students around the state. A little background before introducing our guests, I just wanted to share some common reasons why students take online learning. Oftentimes it's been to take it for recovering credit, but there are so many other reasons, especially in light of the mental health challenges that we face today, that students are taking them for health and other reasons. They are also taking them to forward their credits. But as you see, access to dual enrollment courses is another reason that students are taking online courses. Their schedule or transportation conflicts are an issue, or they may just simply not have a ready access to dual enrollment and higher ed opportunities. So when you think about online learning, it ranges from teacherless to teacher-led, and on the other continuum, fully online to supplemental programs. Michigan Virtual falls in that space. Great technology, there we go, okay. Michigan Virtual falls in that supplemental program teacher-led focus area. So we have certified teachers facilitating courses in partnership with schools around the state and nation. We've historically had pass rates above 80%, which is really exciting in light of the statewide virtual pass rate average at 55. And we are excited that in our first semester of offering dual enrollment courses that it's consistent with these pass rates at 84%. At this time, I'd like to welcome our guest to the webinar, and we'll start with Pete.
Good morning. Thank you, Kristen. My name is Pete Lacey. I'm the Vice President of Student Services at SC4. I've been at the college for 24 years, serve in the capacity of Vice President over everything from admissions, advising, athletics, financial aid, disability support services, college housing, basically anything from the time a student enters till the time they graduate. I'm excited to be here today to share some information about our college.
My name is Jessica Stewart. I'm an admissions representative at St. Clair County Community College. I've been with the college for 6 years, both in roles in the registrar's office as well as my current role. I work recruiting and in advising admissions for new students and do have a focus on the early admission process with dual enrollment and middle college students.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jamie Jacobs, Deputy Director at the Michigan College Access Network. I play some administrative roles and then also lead our high school facing work at the organization.
Great. I'd also like to introduce Chris Ebsch, who's been instrumental in launching our dual enrollment pilot this past fall and expansion this semester. Chris?
Thank you. Chris Ebsch, I'm the Administrator of Educational Programs at Michigan Virtual. My background has been in education for 20 years now, both as a high school teacher and administrator, from assistant principal to district administrator positions in a couple of different school districts around the state. I joined Michigan Virtual 4 years ago and have been working with them on their curricular programming and maintaining their course catalog, partnering with a number of different companies and other partners and our own product development team to offer quality online courses.
Great, thanks, Chris. I'd like to, at this time, turn it over to Jamie to talk about MCAN.
Thanks, Kristen. So I just wanted to make sure that we give everyone a quick 101 of the Michigan College Access Network. For those of you on the call who know us well, this would be a really good time to take a little bit of a break, relax, have some sips of coffee. For those of you who don't know our organization well, I want to make sure you understand big picture who we are, and then we'll talk a little bit about the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. Our mission, we are a 501c3 statewide intermediary organization. Our mission is to increase college readiness, participation, and completion in Michigan, and we're particularly focused on the populations where we see the biggest gaps. Those are low-income students, first-generation college-going students, or would-be first-generation college-going students, and students of color. Everything we do is in support of the now statewide goal set by Governor Whitmer in her State of the State about a year ago now, to increase the percent of Michigan residents with degrees and post-secondary certificates to 60% by 2030. Next, you'll see 4 slides. So we're going to quickly go through what we consider to be our value statements. Those of you who know us know we always talk about these. The reason I talk about them is sort of accessibility to our work and to our language and our conversation. We never want folks at the end of me talking to say, I would like to start off by saying I don't think everyone is college material, and we find out that we're working from different definitions of the word college. I want you to know how we define college, how we define the work that we do and the language that we use, so that you can access the content that we have to offer from the way we intend for you to do so. So the first of our value statements is that college is post-secondary education. We use the term college interchangeably with post-secondary educational attainment. For one, it's a lot easier to say. We have a lot to say. We say it really quickly. I don't have time to say post-secondary educational attainment 15 times in a 10-minute presentation, so college is just easier. The second is that we think it's incredibly important and valuable to level the playing field when we're talking about college. When you ask the average person what they think of college, they often say a 4-year bricks and mortar on-campus dorm experience, but then many other folks have associate degrees that they may have gotten on a campus but weren't living on campus, and others who have certificates also from community colleges, all post-secondary, all formal education, all accredited or provided by accredited institutions, and we would argue all college, all have value in the labor market, and when we level that playing field, we have students making decisions about what's the best fit for them, as opposed to well, this is just a certificate program, or this is just an associate degree program, as opposed to sort of thinking about these as just opportunities to pursue and move their career. The second value statement is that college is a necessity. Can you go back 1 slide, Kristen, for me? I'm not going to share a bunch of data with you today. I think I only have 1 data slide. Go forward 1 slide. But no matter how you slice and dice the data, when you look at college when you define college as a post-secondary certificate or degree, It is a prerequisite for success in a knowledge-based economy. We, in the past, considered Michigan to be a manufacturing-based economy. We no doubt have still a fairly robust manufacturing industry, but it is shrinking, and the job requirements and the skills required now are much more advanced and much more technical as automation becomes a key piece of manufacturing. That means we are really moving into this space, and really already have as a knowledge-based economy. What that means for us, what that means for the state, is that everyone needs to pursue and complete a post-secondary credential beyond high school. The third value statement is that college is for everyone. You saw in our mission statement a particular focus where we see the biggest gaps, and those gaps persist all the way from four-year graduation rates to college readiness, placement into developmental education courses through to completion, and then inevitably play out in terms of our workforce. We think it's really important that we hyper-focus to decrease the gaps that we see across the board. So you'll see this pay out in ways that we hyper-focus our grant making, our programming, our outreach, our technical assistance into communities, schools, and organizations that serve a higher proportion of low-income students, students of color, and would-be first-generation college-going students. Our last value statement is that college is a public good. This one tends to be often the most controversial statement. It is relatively well agreed upon that college is a private good. That means that I benefit, so the more well-educated I am as an individual, I personally benefit from that. And typically the way folks talk about that is by income. Greater wealth, which provides me as an individual some benefits that I hold private. It is also true that there are all of these positive externalities that happen in communities with a high proportion of well-educated individuals. So even if I was not well-educated, say I had less than a high school diploma, but I was fortunate enough by happenstance maybe to live in a community like Ann Arbor, Michigan that was incredibly well-educated, I benefit by living in that community. There's a more prosperous economy. There's a downtown business infrastructure because there's more local funds being put back into the economy. There's enough funds and a tax base to support social service programs. There's more arts and culture activities. As a community, we're more likely to read to our children. We're less likely to be obese. We're less likely to smoke, more likely to engage in preventative health care. Across the board, regardless of what your issue is, it's really hard to not be able to connect those positive outcomes for communities back to educational attainment. So for that reason, we really do think increase in post-secondary education is a public good. So, excuse me, I promised only one data slide, which is not my norm. I usually talk about 15 data slides, but data slides on a webinar are maybe the absolute worst thing you could possibly do to fix. So the one I wanted to throw in front of you really gets at that value statement around college as a necessity. So what you see here is what feels like a little bit of a delay in data, but this is what happens when you're looking at long-term data. So what you have on the left in 2017 is what Michigan, so this is Michigan-specific data, what our post-secondary educational attainment is when you divide it out into the different levels of credentialing. So you'll see in blue, if you look at those donut charts from the top at like 12 o'clock and you follow them around clockwise, you're looking at high school, the percentage of adults, working age adults with a high school diploma. In orange, some college, no degree, etc. You can follow that all the way around to the green back towards the top of those, the percent that hold a graduate or professional degree. That is what we have in 2017. I know it is not 2017, I'm not crazy, but this data's got a little bit of a lag. Then you see what the projected need is for 2020, which is now, right? It is now officially 2020. And you'll see some things that look different. A few of the things that we often ask folks, we say, point out what you see. What are some things that are standing out to you? No doubt the first thing that almost every individual or community says is the stark contrast between having currently 4% of our working age adults with a certificate as their terminal credential, meaning they did not go on to earn any education post that. And that is a demand increase in 2020 right now to 16%. That is the category that needs the most dramatic growth. And in most communities, you are hearing that, right? That is a conversation we're hearing in communities. We need to find ways to think about how we get more students into certificate pathways. What you'll also notice is that we don't need less, and in almost every category, with the exception of a 0.5% in graduate and professional degrees, we need to increase or maintain where we're at in terms of the percentage of the population, working age adults with an associate of bachelor's or beyond. So what this means to me in summary is we've still got to be really careful when we're having conversations and be really intentional with the conversations we're having around match and fit. We have a large proportion of our population, one of the largest actually in the nation, with some college and no degree. So these are our college dropouts and dropouts, folks that often have debt but no credential, which means their earnings may not have increased, and it's incredibly hard for them to often find ways to pay that debt back or to find ways to get re-engaged in education so that they can actually complete that degree program. There's some really innovative work going on in that space right now, but nonetheless a huge problem. And a big piece of college stopouts and dropouts, when you look at the research and the data, is match and fit, right? We weren't in the right program to begin with, and that led to some complicating factors that stopped a student from completing. And then we also need to reduce the number of folks that are just never starting, those who have a high school diploma and never pursue education beyond their high school diploma. And to me, the summary is those are the folks that we need to be having more intentional conversations with, or the folks who are susceptible to be in those spaces, as opposed to saying, I know you're really interested in a bachelor's degree in nursing. How about instead a med tech certificate program, because we need folks in that space. If that's a better fit program, great. But if that's not a better fit program, we don't want to, the saying of sort of rob Peter to pay Paul. What we'll end up doing is if we just move folks that are currently in the yellow, red, and green into the gray, we'll end up with arguably a much more complicated problem, which is needing to import talent that holds degrees, which are much more costly, and again, also where there's opportunities for even more earnings. We'd love that to go to Michiganders. So I just want you to chew on this data for a little bit. We actually will have updated data on this within the next few months, so we're really excited to share that with everyone as well. But this is, I think, just a helpful perspective on where we sit and where we'd like to be.
Great, thanks, Jean. Can you tell us where dual enrollment fits into MCAN's strategy?
Yeah, so on the next slide, you'll see a graphic from our most recent strategic plan. What you see highlighted on the arrows pointing towards the center of the 60% by 2030 are our key strategies through 2021. Quite frankly, we see dual enrollment fitting into every single one of these categories. Some of them I think are incredibly obvious, things like college affordability. We know that dual enrollment costs students far less, especially students who are successful in dual enrollment, save money. The ones that may be less obvious are like a college-going culture. So in a lot of communities, they have this really robust conversation around students who don't think they're college material. Especially if we don't have access to a college in our community. So students may have never been on a college campus, they don't see themselves on a college campus. How do we get them to understand that they indeed are college material? A key way to do that is dual enrollment. And quite frankly, in many cases, that's virtual or online dual enrollment because they are in an education desert and don't have physical access, or there may be transportation issues. So we think this plays a big role. We think dual enrollment and just early college credit taking writ large plays a really big role in increasing the college-going culture in communities. Positive experiences in college help to reinforce a college-going identity within an individual, especially if that individual is a first-generation or would be a first-generation college-going student and may not sort of foresee that as the natural next step for them. When we think about pathways and transitions, What we're talking about is how do we better communicate and set up really clean pathways so that students can make their way seamlessly from K-12 into post-secondary, arguably from a community college into a university setting if that's what they're interested in. And you'll hear Pete and Jessica talk a little bit later about how dual enrollment can easily be a part of things like the Michigan Transfer Agreement and how credits can move both into other community colleges or into four-year institutions as well. And then the last is credential completion. To us, this is an obvious one, but the data is clear. Students who participate in dual enrollment or early college credit taking opportunities of lots of varieties are more likely to enroll and inevitably are more likely to complete the credentials that they are pursuing and are likely to complete those credentials faster. So that is also a college affordability piece. The faster you complete credentials, typically the less debt you're accruing in that process. You'll also notice a couple other words on here that I just want to point out. That's how we approach our work. I said earlier on the first slide, we are an intermediary organization. I want to be clear, if you don't know us, that means we don't serve students directly. Beyond my own children and the students I mentor through community-based volunteer work that I do, we don't work directly with students. We consider ourselves the folks that try to build infrastructure, convene, advocate, build capacity, and help those who serve students be better supported and resourced in doing that. So those of you who might be on the webinar that are school counselors, you know that I work with you a ton, school administrators, we work with community leaders a lot, and then of course we work with our friends within the legislature a lot as well to make sure that the environment, the infrastructure, the resources, and the support are what is changing around the adults so that the adults can better support students through these pathways.
Great, thanks Jamie for that high-level overview of the organization. What are some ways that folks are engaged with or can engage with MCAN more specifically?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. So the next couple of slides, I'll talk about just what our programmatic work looks like. I think there's probably like 16 bullets across the next 4 pages. I will not be going through each of these in depth, but I wanted to make sure to sort of tease each of these so as they align with priorities or could align and be part of priorities within your communities, you know to tap us that we could be potentially a key support funder, capacity builder for your community. So our key strategy of high school innovation, I'm actually the lead of the high school innovation strategy within our organization, and what you see here are some of the key pieces of that strategy. The first is professional development of practitioners. We consider practitioners any direct service providers that are talking to students about college and career readiness. This is a lot of folks, but primarily our professional development has focused on skill building and expertise building and focus of school counselors. At the end of the day, our student to school counselor ratios in Michigan are abysmal. They're second to the worst in the nation. Which means, yes, we need to advocate for there to be more school counselors, but we also need to make sure we're advocating for school counselors to have appropriate duties on their plate and to have the necessary training so that in the limited amount of time that they quite frankly have with students, they know exactly where to go to get the best information to guide students through these processes. So we've invested a lot in professional development of school counselors. Additionally, we also have invested in folks that aren't school counselors. So we call this sort of broad group of folks career and college access specialists. It's a professional learning community, access to training and connectedness to folks that are serving in the college and career access space that may be working under a variety of titles. These are folks that are serving often out of an ISD, career navigators, career consultants, college advisors, folks that often are working in isolation around their particular task. And what we find is these folks come to us and they say, oh, I was trained as a French teacher and then I ended up grabbing this job. I'm super excited about it, but really all I can speak to is my own experience. I don't have expertise in how to help students through these processes. So we're really glad they're hired. We're really glad they know how to work with young people, but we also need to make sure that they're content experts in this topic if they're going to be talking to students. And so we hope to do that through the PLC, and we do. The next is that we host an annual conference. Our next annual conference is March 26th and 27th. Registration's open. We would love to have you participate in that conference. If you're interested, please do reach out so that you can register. The fourth item you see listed here is high school grant making. We have a 4-year high school grant-making infrastructure, so high schools could receive up to $40,000 from us over 4 years to invest in more strategic and systems change practices, changes in infrastructure, policy, practice, institutionalizing work around college and career readiness. If you're not thinking about that, you're not a part of it, we'd love to consider you being a part of that and providing you funds to move that work. The next item is the College Bound Michigan campaign. This is Michigan College Month, College Cash Campaign, College Decision Day. Many schools participate in this. This is likely our most familiar program to other folks. We've got about 450 schools across the state that participate in one or all of these initiatives. Michigan College Month is a drive for students to complete high school applications in the month of October. College Cash Campaign, which is now partnered with the governor's FAFSA challenge, is a challenge to increase FAFSA completion rates and support students through FAFSA completion. And then Decision Day is mirrored after NCAA signing day. So folks that are familiar with the sort of pomp and circumstance around athletes as they sit at a table and they officially make the decision about where they will go to play basketball or football or tennis or you name it, and they hold up a jersey, they throw on a hat, folks are excited, there's photos, there's clapping, and there's expectations that are set by the community and their family. What a cool idea to think about how can we scale that so students, all students who are making post-secondary education decisions have an opportunity to be recognized for that decision, but also for the community to say, hey, they made a decision and I'm gonna in some ways check in on them because I'm gonna, when I see them in the community, say, hey, I remember you talking about going to CMU. How's that going, right? There's some accountability pieces to that as well as culture building as young folks in the community can participate in those types of activities as well. Excuse me. The last 3 things on this slide you likely have never heard about, and that is because they have not yet launched. So these are sort of sneak peek items that are coming down the pike in the next 6 months from the organization. The first is a focus on talking about and providing some videos and info sheets for practitioners to talk more eloquently with students about what we consider and what the field considers stackable credentials. That's not the way we'll talk about it with students, but pathways where a student can start with a certificate program. There's viable career opportunities, but there's also easy pathways through an associate, bachelor's, maybe even a master's degree program if they're interested in furthering their education and their career. Not all pathways have really good credential pathways. We talk a lot about career pathways, but career pathways don't always line up with the credentialing from, you know, a CNA to an LPN to an associate to bachelor's RN. Sometimes those pathways on a credentialing standpoint line up really nicely, and a lot of times they don't. So we want to highlight, and we will be highlighting those that have some really nice credential pathways and job opportunities across that entire continuum. The next is the School Counselor Fellows Program, focused on leadership development and advocacy of school counselors at the statewide level. And then lastly, an Academic Transitions Grant Project. This will be focused on some demonstration sites that will be receiving large grants, K-12 higher ed partnerships focused in on developmental education reform. How can we better utilize scheduling and course planning in our junior and senior years so that students are being, if you will, sort of brought up to speed in math and English and writing in high school, and how can we also on the college end be making sure we're thinking about our developmental education courses and how we're thinking about things like co-requisite and just largely developmental education reform at scale so all students are more seamlessly moving through that transition from K-12 to higher ed.
This is great, Jamie. How can a school who's more interested in learning more about these opportunities connect with MCAN?
Yeah, Yeah, so you'll see on the bottom left of all of these slides, there's an email address. That email address is the first name of a staff member at an organization who leads one of these key strategies as a whole. Please do reach out to that individual. So if any of those pieces sounded interesting, or you were just like, I gotta know more, please shoot me an email. Of course, you can shoot me an email to ask about any of these pieces. I'll make sure you get to the right staff member within the organization. But if you have a particular interest, pay attention to that email on the left-hand bottom side of your screen. That's your go-to person in the organization. Moving on to the next key strategy is our community mobilization work. Many of you may be familiar with our local college access network strategy across the state. This is a cross-sector collaborative community engagement strategy prioritizing educational attainment. In most communities, prioritizing educational attainment as an economic development strategy. How do we make sure that we can attract businesses and also have the educational needs to fill the jobs in those, or the educational credentials so that our community members can fill the jobs within those positions. We have 30 local college access networks across the state. We'd love to talk to more folks about what that looks like if your community does not have one. The second is community ambassadors. This is a newer program within the organization, but in communities where we don't have a local college access network infrastructure, we're often doing our work on a really granular level. So we're building relationships with school principals individually, maybe superintendents, a United Way president, a community college president, admissions director, folks like Pete and Jessica, and we're doing that one by one, as opposed to an LCAN where we can build those relationships at a more community level. So what we're hoping to do and what we're doing with the community ambassador work is communities that don't have a local college access network infrastructure but really want to double down on the college access sort of enrollment, attainment work in the community. We have some funds set aside for folks to set aside a portion of a person's time to prioritize this work. And what we mean by prioritizing is really communication, taking things that are happening at the state, opportunities that are available, funneling those down into the appropriate folks who can take advantage of them in a community if it's a right fit and it's the right model, and then providing feedback back to us at the state level that we can share with partners we have like MDE or the Community College Association, et cetera. The third is innovative program grants. This is something we've had for several years, but I feel like flies under the radar. We provide small grants, $10,000 grants to community organizations. So innovative program grants, any applicant that's a legitimate organization is eligible to apply. It could be a statewide organization, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a for-profit, it could be a school, it could be a college. At the end of the day, innovative program grants are awarded to folks who've got innovative ideas in college and career access. So this could be things like scaling an effective program. It could also look like piloting a whole new idea. It could also look like taking an effective program. Let's take, for example, a Big Brothers Big Sisters mentoring program and saying, look, we're effective at what we do, and we think we can intentionally infuse college access into our work in these ways, and we want to try that out. So there's lots of ways we look at innovation in that work. It's not a ton of money. $10,000 only gets you so far, but it could be what's necessary to add the spark and the funding to try out some of these ideas that no doubt exist in communities, and sometimes it's hard to find the funding just to get it kick-started. And then the last is, despite the fact that we're the Michigan College Access Network, many would argue we are the most robust statewide college access network. As a result, we get pulled in to do a lot of national technical assistance across all of our work, and this department actually leads that work. The next is our sort of newest bucket strategy. Don't think that this work is not as robust because it has less bullets. Both of these are beasts of programs, if you will. So many folks are familiar with the College Advising Corps model, the U of M College Advising Corps, the MSU College Advising Corps. About 5 years ago, MCAN scaled this work and launched the Advise Michigan program. What this does is hire national service members, AmeriCorps members, to serve recent college graduates that are near peer, to serve alongside school counselors, build their capacity, build the school's capacity to provide the necessary navigational support for students to transition seamlessly into post-secondary education programs. The Advise Michigan program has 56 college advisors across 72 high schools in the state. When you put all of the advising cores in Michigan together, we have over 100 advisors serving 130 schools. So a lot of these folks across the state, most folks know at least one of these individuals, a strategy that's shown increases of up to 10% in college enrollment rates in communities that have these individuals. Because of that success and the continued work necessary around completion in the fall, so this is another sneak peek, you might be like, I've never heard of this. So you've never heard of this, even if you know us potentially, because this is also new. So we will be launching in the fall the College Completion Core. Mirrored similarly after Advise Michigan, but in many ways very different. This program also will be a national service program of AmeriCorps members who are college graduates who have experience in an associate degree program at a community college. Ideally, they completed that associate degree before transferring so they can really talk about that experience at a community college campus. This will be national service members, completion coaches that will be placed on community college campuses, supporting cohorts of students with the necessary sort of wrap-around and connectedness to campus-based support services that we know already exist, but students have a hard time navigating to increase completion rates at community colleges. So more to come on that one.
Thank you, Jamie, for all that information. I'd like to really turn over to Chris to hear about the vision of online dual enrollment and a little more about the programming and relationships.
Okay, so Michigan Virtual started researching our ways that we could promote access to post-secondary educational attainment back in the middle of 2018. And we explored a number of different options, looking into the avenues related to the statewide catalog under 21F of the State School Aid Act. We looked at the early middle college programs around the state. Ultimately, though, we landed on dual enrollment under the Post-Secondary Education Opportunities Act to provide the most flexible avenue for the most students while in high school, in alignment with our vision of using digital learning to allow students to reach their full potential and to promote quality K-12 education around the state of Michigan. Dual enrollment was the vehicle through which we could reach the most students. Now, obviously, Michigan Virtual is not a educational, well, we're a supplemental provider. As Kristen mentioned earlier, we're not a school, and nor are we a community college or a post-secondary educational institution. So we needed to find the right partner out there that we could utilize to promote the governor's goal towards 60% attainment by 2030. And we felt that we could use the tools at our disposal with the right partnership to achieve much of that while in high school. When we started looking into the need around the state and verifying that this was a need, we were astounded by data provided by the Center for Educational Performance and Information, CEPI, that in recent years, there was as low a participation rate in dual enrollment as you're seeing on the screen now. Less than 5% of eligible high school students had taken a dual enrollment course in Michigan that year. And nearly half of the public school entities in the state had zero participation among their high school students in dual enrollment. So that really spoke to us as a need. Obviously, the physical barrier is the one that we felt that we had the greatest leverage to overcome through virtual learning. You can see on the map here the location, at least of primary campuses. So take this with a grain of salt. This is not a representation of all the various satellite campuses around the state. But in documenting the location of main campuses in our community colleges and both for-profit and not-for-profit, public and private post-secondary institutions, there's a wide variety of counties, in fact, more than half of counties in the state that don't have a main campus located within their physical boundaries. And we wanted to use virtual learning to bring that opportunity to students in high schools around the state, not only where where their school district may reside in a county that lacks a campus, but obviously there are students within a high school population that even if they're within a few miles of campus, they personally may not have the transportation means to get from their high school to that campus. So we decided to seek out the right partner with a quality suite of online college courses, and then try to not only use the virtual means to overcome that geographic barrier, but also to leverage our network and relationships and name recognition with over 500 schools around the state of Michigan. Michigan Virtual had over 30,000 enrollments from schools around the state last year. So schools generally know us and they come to us seeking online courses. So we wanted them to be able to find those college courses directly within our catalog and help facilitate some of the registration processes to get their students into college. So I want to turn it back over to Kristen to introduce our community college partners.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. As many of you may know, St. Clair County Community College has been a leader in offering dual enrollment opportunities. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Pete and Jessica and have you guys share a little bit of background regarding the work of SC4.
Great, thank you, Kristen. I'll quickly kind of just cover a brief history of the college. So I've been here 24 years. 96 is when the legislation went in for dual enrollment. And at that point in time, we saw select students from various schools taking a course or two. About a decade ago, we started our first early college, and that was with Dr. Kevin Miller at Croswell Lexington High School at the time. He's now the superintendent of our local RISA. But all of the things you heard Jamie and Chris just talk about, Croslex is in a rural community, access to education very difficult, a lot of great students not actually continuing on to college after high school. And so we started the early college. Happy to report more than a decade later, that is still in existence and thriving. It actually evolved into what we call our Blue Water Middle College, which we started with Dan DeGrow, who was instrumental in MCAN. And Dan had the same kind of vision for our county. And we today have more than 600 students that we service in that Blue Water Middle College. 3 years ago, we started a technical middle college. So when you look at the slide, the data slide that Jamie provided with certificates and associate degree opportunities, we partner with RISA and their technical programs to do a technical middle college, and that is beginning to grow. The bottom line with all of this work is that getting students into college and getting that experience early while they're still in high school has been very effective. We have some excellent professors who have really embraced this idea. And the map that you see here indicates, we serve more than 1,000 students each semester. The stars that are on there, I think, is a cool indicator of this work that's happening. So we are located in Port Huron, Michigan, which is over on the east side in the thumb. But you can start to see those gold, blue, and green stars are areas that our campus is currently working with students and or the MCAN or MSU advisors in those areas. So very excited about this work. A couple quick things I want to update the viewers on is we are going to be the host site for Camp College 2020. This is going to bring the 10th and 11th grade students from our region, underrepresented, often first generation students who want to learn how to navigate college. And so that'll be May 14th. We look forward to having those students on our campus. And then the next slide talks a little bit about an event that we did in collaboration with the MSU Advising Corps and Michigan College Access Network. We hosted advisors who are in the high schools, kind of in the trenches, working with students and parents on going to college. And we had awesome discussion about access and how our campus, as well as others around the state, can play a role to help reach that governor's goal. We will be hosting the MCAN and MSU advisors again, May 21 and 22. They stay in our college dorms, which is kind of unique for a community college, but we have an awesome downtown setting. We show them our community, show them the campus, and have that dialogue about ways to improve access and completion. Just real quick on this slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. All of these courses that are offered through the Michigan Virtual site, they are our college courses, our professors, and actually a unique piece of this is that students are going to be enrolled with our college students. So this is not an exclusive high school dual enrolled class. The classes will fulfill our degree requirements. They also all meet the Michigan transfer agreement for those students that want to continue on. And then many students and schools use this as part of their high school requirements as well, which is up to the high school staff. So I'm going to let you and Kristen and Jeff take it from here.
Yeah, great, Pete. Thank you. Can you, Jessica, please provide just a brief overview of dual enrollment opportunities for high school students that we currently offer?
Yeah, so currently we have 25 courses, which is a combination of those courses that would fulfill the 30 credits or 10 classes that are involved in the Michigan Transfer Agreement. We also have the opportunity to add on some of those more occupational or elective type courses. You can see the subject area: business, healthcare, criminal justice. I think it's important that we mention that these courses definitely align with MCAN's vision of college for everybody, and that college is just a general term we use for students that are pursuing some sort of education beyond high school. For example, the healthcare courses include medical terminology, which if you have a student who's going to focus maybe on CNA certificate after high school, it doesn't necessarily require college credit courses, but it does help that student gain a competitive edge in the workplace and when they are seeking that certificate. I also mentioned that business courses, if students are very focused on arts or photography or eventually want to run their own business, a college credit course might not be required again, but taking a principles of business or a business law course could be very beneficial to that student. So overall, the courses that are being offered really are for all students.
Great, Jessica. I think some folks online may have questions about the Michigan Transfer Agreement. Can you share how SC4 courses are offered via Michigan Virtual and how that fits?
Yes, so the Michigan Transfer Agreement, I assume most of you are familiar with it, but it is an agreement that allows for students to start at a community college and earn those general education or liberal arts courseworks that essentially they are about a quarter of a bachelor's level degree. So you're covering all of those general education courses that are required at that university to complete that bachelor's level degree. And they are still in pieces the most transferable course options. You can see the breakdown of those courses to in communication, social science, humanities, science, and then a mathematics course. I think the most amazing thing about this is that we have been able to incorporate online science opportunities to fulfill that agreement, which traditionally has been very difficult. The courses in science do include those with lab and without lab and are in 2 different subject areas so the student could complete the agreement. The math courses are another area that I would like to just say have been traditionally difficult to offer to students, considering that every student is different, every student places in different math courses. So the idea with the opportunity to take up to 10 of those college classes within high school 9 through 12, it's amazing that it truly can be completed through the course offerings that we have with Michigan Virtual.
Maybe just talking about some of the positives and advantages of taking dual enrollment courses online.
Absolutely. So obviously the first point here would be that they now have access to our dual enrollment rate, which is equivalent to our in-district rate. This is beneficial to all students, but it's specifically beneficial to those that we just mentioned that are in education deserts that don't necessarily have access to an in-district community college. So this keeps the costs low for schools as well as low for students. The courses are quality courses taught by professionals in their field. The class sizes are small, so students experience very individualized attention. They do have direct access to St. Clair County Community College staff, specifically relating to assistance in navigating our systems, as well as assistance for the counselors in class placement. You'll see later that part of the requirements of admission would be to submit SAT scores or a high school transcript. Our staff are instrumental in evaluating that to provide feedback to the counselor and the student to ensure that the student, yes, are registered, but are also going to be successful in the course that they selected. We have direct access to the Michigan Virtual as well as the schools where we can provide data to them, such as enrollment and grading opportunities.
Can you also share an overview of the dual enrollment process and how high schools can work with SC4 to register students?
Absolutely. The process, I feel, is a very streamlined and fairly easy process. It starts with Michigan Virtual. Students go through the student learning portal. They register for those classes that are listed on Michigan Virtual's website. I mentioned before that you upload your SAT reports or transcripts, which are very important parts to ensure that the student is going to be successful in the course they have requested. Once that happens, the student receives an email that they do have to accept. I am missing the exact word for it, but they accept the Michigan Virtual kind of rules surrounding it. Once the student submits that agreement, then the data is generated to us and me specifically at this point. I get the student into our systems, I get them registered, and then I provide them with an email right off the bat, initially on their first registration, to their personal account with some details on how they can access certain systems, what the next steps are, and then we would mail them via postal mail a acceptance letter that would have further details on how they're accessing our sites, such as our portal, our student email, and then our Canvas online learning system. So overall, I would say a very good and pretty seamless process. One important thing that is being listed here, the points of contact at SC4. So a Michigan Virtual student would still have access to all of the resources that are available to any dual enrollment or student here at St. Clair County Community College. You can see numbers listed here for our enrollment services, student services, bookstore. Those are all available to students. Disability services, transcripts, and then FERPA, which is an important point for parents to understand that information is being shared between administrators at Michigan Virtual, the high schools and college, but we can also work with parents that maybe want to be involved in that process as well. I do want to point out that they also have access to any sort of tutoring services on top of, it lists our Achievement Center as disability and accommodations, but if they have a need for tutoring services, they can access those as well. Obviously, with these students being distance, we have been working to bring NetTutor to campus to allow for that 24/7 service for students that are distance learning students.
Excellent. Thank you so much, both of you. Chris, can you tell us a little bit more about the calendaring and pricing, how they differ from the other offerings?
Sure. Yeah. For those in the audience who may have had students enroll in virtual courses, you probably experienced our full-length semester term calendar. You're going to find that the dual enrollment calendar varies a bit from this, and I want to explain why we see that as an advantage. So SC4 offers an abbreviated term, kind of akin to a trimester length, and it has a delayed start. So while schools may be commencing the year in mid to late August or immediately after the Labor Day holiday, you'll find that the fall term here doesn't start until mid-September. And then likewise, while our typical semester length courses kick off in January, you'll find that the winter term doesn't start till mid-February. So it provides that extra time to the high school office and guidance office to work through scheduling issues, to go ahead and get the student registered and the documents uploaded, and that very quick turnaround time from SC4 to confirm the registration and get the communication back to the student, as well as the student's lead time to review the syllabus and the required materials or textbook and decide how they want to gain access to that material, all before the class start date kicks off. And as far as the tuition rate, it was mentioned earlier that that's one of the great benefits that SC4 is bringing to the table. This slide here represents the current year of 1920 school year tuition and fees from SC4. These are their standard rates for those students who are in district, meaning those who live right near there, right? So they're extending that in-district rate all the way across the state of Michigan. And so anywhere in the state, students can qualify for that affordable tuition and fees. And then Michigan Virtual, again, is processing a lot of not only that registration, but the payment to SC4 so that we can kind of take some of the pain points around the managerial stuff out of the way of students and their schools.
Awesome. Well, at this time,
go ahead.
This time I'd like to turn it over to any questions that might be looming. Chris, I don't know if there's any in the chat window that maybe you haven't been able to answer that you want to bring up.
I don't have anything just yet in the chat window. Maybe for those who are still with us, if you want to enter a question in the chat, I'll pay close attention to that. I don't know if
Yeah,
you wanted to chime in.
Well, just a reminder that if you verbally want to express your question, just raise your hand and the webinar manager will provide you an opportunity to speak. If you want to actually ask a question, let's go with the field first and see if there's any questions. And while we're waiting for the questions that might be coming in, Chris, as you're kind of exploring the chat window, we'll get back to the question for Jamie. I think her mic is working. About MCAN's leadership in policy discussions around early college.
So I just wanted to echo some of the work that we're doing at the statewide level through the Higher Education Attainment Roundtable. So statewide education leaders focus on how we scale opportunities for students, especially as talked about now by everyone in spaces that are education deserts. We tend to use the word early college credit taking opportunities, which is inclusive of the variety of opportunities, but we're hyper-focused in that policy work around where we see some issues in the policies as they sit. Disincentives in funding, so if you look across the nation, states that have incentives or no disincentives financially in the dual enrollment space have a much larger number of students participating in dual enrollment. There's some eligibility concerns, how a student becomes eligible, how we understand if a student is eligible, are we in the right eligibility space, and are we interpreting and applying that correctly across the board, and then more largely just this equity issue. Students are susceptible to, quite frankly, whatever the adults in their community think they can pull off, have access to, are interested in. And you often see that there are districts that have a myriad of opportunities in early college credit taking, and then districts that have a very few low number. So those are the issues we're prioritizing on a policy front.
Awesome, thank you, Jamie. Chris, any questions to bring forward to the group?
So one of the questions that came up was with regard to payment. I was just pointing out that we do submit payment directly to SC4. All the invoices are sent to the schools from Michigan Virtual's finance office. We submit payment to SC4. We also bill MDE on behalf of SC4 for any non-public school dual enrollments, and the Treasury Department in the state submits payment directly to SC4 as well. There was a question also on whether students need to complete SC4's online dual enrollment application. That is not the case. The submission of the registration data in the SLP by the school enroller is sufficient, coupled with the student's submission of the online web form confirming their agreement to the terms and conditions and their, confirming their acknowledgement of the privacy rights and FERPA compliance in how the program operates. The student is submitting the remainder of their student data as well in terms of their address and phone number and email beyond what the enroller from the school is submitting to the SLP. So between those two communications, we've covered all the data collection for the student that we then transmit to SC4. I have a question also stating some colleges have expressed that they won't take an online dual enrollment course as transfer credit. Is this changing now? I'm gonna let Pete chime in here.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. This question, certainly we get this often about transferability. So just as a reminder, this is our college class, our college professor, and it is not an exclusive dual enrollment class. We don't designate whether a student takes a class on campus, off campus, online, and so transferability of these courses is not of concern. The concerns that we hear across the state are things like direct credit or concurrent enrollment, where it may be taught as an online situation in that capacity. Certainly it's always up to the receiving institution to decide whether they accept the course or not, but in that decade plus experiences that I noted earlier, we have not had issues with students being able to transfer these seamlessly in the state as well as to many locations outside of our state.
Thank you, Pete. One more question we have in the chat. Students, let's see, are school districts billed for dual enrollment courses the way they are for regular Michigan virtual classes? So the way that we've done this through the first round of billing this past fall was that we wait until the enrollment window closes, and then we generate an invoice and send that to the school for all the eligible tuition and fees charged by SC4. And then again, we collect those funds, and the transmission of funds between SC4 and Michigan Virtual has been seamless. And then of course, the non-public schools are not billed directly, but that's under the law, done through a submission of a billing form to MDE, and they work with payment to SC4 through the Treasury. So in most cases, for most students, that covers 100% of their tuition and fees under the eligible charges. That said, it's entirely possible that there may be a nominal amount that is above and beyond what's required of a school to cover under the law, in which case Michigan Virtual sends a secondary invoice or billing statement directly to the student, and they're responsible for covering that balance.
All right, well, thank you. We are a little over time, so I want to pose any questions that might be still out there to be asked directly to the folks here, and we will send their contact information. It's in the recording, but we'll send their contact information with the recording link. I do want to remind folks that may not know that we do have these free guides to online learning from the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute. So really any key stakeholders that want to know more about online learning and best practices in research, there are guides out there at mblri.org/guides. And I would like to thank Jamie, Pete, Jessica, and Chris for joining us today and sharing their insights and expertise. And please let us know if you have any further questions. Thanks for joining us today, and feel free to share the recording with other colleagues that may have missed it today. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. Thanks so much.